What happens when a Hollywood icon known for his raw authenticity walks into the spotlight of a morning show host, ready to challenge his every word? Pedro Pascal thought he was joining Good Morning America for a quick plug of his latest blockbuster, Fantastic Four, where he stars as the brilliant Reed Richards. But what unfolded was a fiery clash that left the audience stunned, producers reeling, and social media poised to erupt. This wasn't just a promotional interview gone sideways. It was a showdown that exposed personal grudges and tested the limits of professional decorum, revealing truths no one expected. Hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments, because this story builds to a breaking point that will keep you hooked until the very end. Pedro Pascal stepped onto the Good Morning America set, his signature charm on full display, waving to the cheering crowd as he flashed a warm grin, his tailored suit catching the studio lights. George Stephanopoulos greeted him with a polished smile, shaking his hand and hyping his role in Fantastic Four, tossing in a light jab about Pedro's knack for stealing scenes. The audience clapped, but George's tone carried a subtle edge, a hint of something brewing as he leaned forward, ready to pivot the conversation. "Thanks for having me, George. It's great to be here," Pedro said, settling into his chair, his Chilean accent softening his words, his eyes bright as he nodded to the co-hosts, Robin Roberts and Michael Strahan, who smiled but seemed to sense a shift coming. "We're thrilled to have you, Pedro," George replied, his voice smooth but pointed. "But I've got to ask about something you said in a recent interview. You know, that bit about celebrities and talk show hosts needing to stick to their craft instead of preaching politics. Care to clarify what you meant by that?" The audience stirred, catching the undercurrent, as Pedro's smile tightened, his hands clasping together. "I think you're tweaking my words a bit, George," he said, his tone calm. "I was talking about staying authentic, about how we should tell stories that bring people together, not push agendas that divide them. I wasn't calling out anyone specific." "Oh, come on, Pedro," George shot back, his eyebrows raised. "You can't drop a line like that and expect it to slide. You said some hosts are lecturing instead of listening. Sounds like you're taking a swipe at folks like us who tackle real issues on air." Pedro leaned forward, his voice steady. "I'm saying there's a way to talk about issues without talking down to people. George, I grew up in San Antonio with immigrant parents who hustled every day. I know what it's like to feel invisible. And I think audiences want stories that respect their lives, not hosts telling them how to vote." George's eyes narrowed, his tone sharpening. "So you're the spokesperson for the little guy now, Pedro? Because starring in Fantastic Four, flying to premieres, living the Hollywood life, that's not exactly the immigrant struggle, is it?" The crowd murmured, some nodding, others uneasy, as Pedro's jaw clenched, his voice firm. "I haven't forgotten my roots, George. My mom worked late nights as a psychologist. My dad scrambled to keep us afloat. I don't claim to speak for everyone, but I know what it's like to grind, unlike some hosts who turn people's pain into morning show segments for ratings." Robin Roberts tried to jump in, her voice gentle. "Okay, let's keep it friendly. Maybe talk about Fantastic Four's big action scenes." But George waved her off, his focus locked on Pedro. "No, Robin. I want to hear this, Pedro. You think I'm just chasing ratings, huh? You think I'm not out here giving a voice to people's struggles every morning?" Pedro shook his head, his voice rising slightly. "I think you pick fights to get clicks, George. I've watched your show. You take serious stuff, jobs, healthcare, and turn it into quick hits to keep people watching. But what about the folks who don't agree with you? You ever try hearing them out?" The audience gasped, the tension spiking, as George leaned back, his voice cutting. "Hear them out, Pedro. I've been doing this since you were auditioning for bit parts. I've earned my right to speak, and I don't need a movie star telling me how to run my show. You're here to sell Fantastic Four, not lecture me." "I'm not lecturing," Pedro fired back, his hands gesturing sharply. "I'm saying you invited me to talk about a movie, but you're turning this into a trap. You're not interested in a real discussion. You just want to dunk on me for saying entertainers should focus on what they do best. George stood, his voice booming. What we do best, Pedro, is shine a light on what matters. Inequality, injustice, the stuff you gloss over in your superhero flicks. You think playing Reed Richards makes you some kind of expert on what's real? Pedro's voice stayed steady, his eyes locked on George's. I never said I'm an expert, but I know storytelling can change hearts. Fantastic Four is about teamwork, hope, not tearing people down. You could try that instead of mocking folks who think differently. The studio went quiet, the air heavy, as Michael Strahan tried to intervene. Maybe we talk about the film's special effects. But George ignored him, his voice sharp. Mocking, huh, that's a good one, Pedro. When did you decide you're the authority on authenticity? With your red carpet life and million-dollar paychecks? Pedro leaned forward, his voice low and pointed. I'm no authority, but I know what's real for the people I grew up with, the ones working 2 jobs, not sitting on a morning show telling them they're wrong. You're not fighting for them, George. You're fighting for your spotlight. George's face tightened, his voice rising. My spotlight, Pedro. I've been out here calling out nonsense since you were scraping by in L.A. Don't come on my show acting like you're above me. You're here to sell a movie, not preach about my platform. The audience murmured, some clapping, others stunned. As Pedro shook his head, his tone firm. I came to talk about Fantastic Four. George, but you made this personal. You want to talk about nonsense. Let's talk about how you ambush guests to make headlines. That's not truth. That's a stunt. George's eyes flashed, his voice sharp. A stunt? You're calling this a stunt? I'm asking you to own your words, Pedro. You said we're out of touch, so stand by it. Or are you just hiding behind that charming grin? Pedro stood, his chair scraping, his voice steady. I stand by my words, George, but I'm not hiding. You're the one turning this into a circus. You invited me here to talk, but all you want is a fight, and I'm not here to play your game. The crowd went silent, the tension electric as producers signaled frantically. Security inching closer, the segment teetering on the edge of a moment that would define both their legacies. Pedro Pascal's chair scraped against the Good Morning America set as he stood, his voice cutting through the charged atmosphere, challenging George Stephanopoulos to stop turning their interview into a personal ambush. George matched his intensity, leaning forward, his polished demeanor giving way to a sharp edge, as he fired back, refusing to let Pedro's accusations slide. The co-hosts, Robin Roberts and Michael Strahan, sat rigid, their attempts to steer the segment towards safer ground ignored, while producers in the control room signaled frantically, their faces pale as the live broadcast veered into chaos. Security guards hovered near the stage, ready to step in, as the clash over Pedro's Fantastic Four promotion and his comments about media authenticity exploded into a full-blown showdown. Hit that subscribe button and drop your thoughts in the comments, because this confrontation is about to hit a breaking point that will leave you stunned. George's hands slammed on the desk, his voice booming. You don't get to walk onto my set, Pedro, and tell me I'm doing my job wrong. I've been reporting on real issues since you were hustling for bit parts, so don't stand there acting like you're above me. You're here to sell Fantastic Four, not preach about how I run my show. Pedro shook his head, his voice steady but fierce. I'm not preaching, George. I'm calling it like I see it. You invited me to talk about a movie, a story about unity and resilience, but you turned this into a trap. You're not asking questions, you're throwing jabs to get headlines. That's not journalism, that's a performance. George leaned forward, his tone sharp. A performance, huh? That's a good one. Pedro, Mr. Reed Richards, playing the noble hero on screen while taking shots at hosts like me who tackle the tough stuff. You think your superhero flick changes the world, it's just entertainment. Pedro's hands gestured sharply, his voice rising. Entertainment, George. Fantastic Four is about people coming together, solving problems, not tearing each other apart. But you wouldn't get that because you're too busy turning every issue into a soundbite. You dismiss half the country to get applause. And you call that reporting? I call it divisive. George stood, his voice cutting through the studio. Divisive, Pedro. I'm divisive because I call out nonsense. I talk about inequality, corruption, the stuff you breeze past in your Hollywood bubble. Don't come here acting like you're the voice of the people just because you had a rough childhood in San Antonio. Pedro stepped closer, his voice low and pointed. I never claimed to be anyone's voice, but I know struggle. My parents were immigrants who worked themselves raw. I don't sit on a morning show making millions to tell people they're wrong for their beliefs. You could try listening to them instead of lecturing. Robin tried to intervene, her voice calm. Okay, let's take a step back. Maybe talk about Fantastic Four's cast. But George waved her off, his eyes locked on Pedro. No, Robin. I want to hear this, Pedro. You think I don't listen? I've been giving people a platform for decades. What have you done besides play make-believe heroes? Pedro's voice rose, his frustration spilling over. Make-believe, George. I tell stories that inspire, that show people they can overcome. I don't claim to fix everything. But I don't mock folks who see the world differently. You invited me here to promote a film, but you're digging into my past to make me look small. That's not reporting, that's a hit job. George's face tightened, his voice sharp. A hit job, Pedro. I'm asking you to own your words. You said hosts like me are out of touch. So stand by it, or are you just dodging like you do in your action scenes? Pedro shook his head, his tone firm. I stand by every word, but I'm not dodging. You're the one who made this personal, bringing up my life like it's a gotcha. If you want to talk about out of touch, let's talk about how you sit here, cashing checks, acting like you're still the scrappy reporter from D.C. The crowd shifted, some clapping for Pedro, others holding their breath, as Michael Strahan tried to jump in. Guys, maybe we talk about the movie's stunts. But George ignored him, his voice rising. Scrappy reporter, Pedro. I've earned every bit of this. I've fought for my voice. And I don't need you coming here, acting like your Hollywood hustle makes you more real than me. Pedro's eyes darkened, his voice cutting. Real, George. Real as my mom working late nights to feed us. Real as my dad hustling to keep us going. I don't pretend to be something I'm not, but you. You take people's pain and turn it into a segment to boost your ratings. That's not real. That's a game. George's hands clenched, his voice booming. A game? You're calling my show a game. I talk about real issues every morning. I give people a voice. You're out here playing superheroes. Acting like you know struggle because you had a tough start. Spare me, Pedro. Pedro stepped closer, his voice low and intense. I'm not acting, I lived it. And I don't use it to score points. You brought me here to talk about a movie, but you're dragging up my past to make me look bad. You're not fighting for truth. You're fighting for clout. The crowd stirred, some cheering, others silent, as George leaned forward, his tone sharp. Clout, huh? You're the one making headlines with your big talk about how we should just tell stories. Don't lecture me about my show when you're out here cashing checks for playing pretend. Pedro's voice stayed steady, his hands gesturing. Cashing checks, George. Let's talk about that. You're not exactly struggling. You've got your penthouses, your awards, but you act like you're still out there fighting the system. You're part of it. And you use your platform to dunk on anyone who disagrees with you. George's eyes flashed, his voice near a shout. Dunk on people, Pedro. I call out privilege like yours. You think your sob story gives you the right to judge me. I've been out here fighting for justice. What have you done besides look good in a cape? Pedro shook his head, his voice fierce. Justice, George. Justice isn't ambushing a guest on live TV. It's not twisting their words to make them the villain. I came here to talk about Fantastic Four, about hope and teamwork. But you made this a fight, and now you're mad because I'm fighting back. The crowd clapped louder, some shouting support. As security edged closer, their hands poised, sensing the moment could tip over. George stood taller, his voice booming. Fighting back, Pedro. You started this. Throwing shade at morning shows. Now you can't handle the heat. If you don't like it, there's the door. Nobody's forcing you to stay. Pedro's chair scraped again, his voice low and fierce. I'm not running, George, but I'm not here to be your punching bag. You want a real conversation, let's have one. But stop playing games, stop trying to tear me down for your viewers' applause. George's face tightened, his voice sharp. Tear you down? I'm asking you to own your words, Pedro. You said we're out of touch, so prove it. Tell me how I'm failing my viewers. Go ahead, enlighten me. Pedro leaned forward, his voice steady. You fail them when you turn their struggles into a segment, when you dismiss their beliefs to get cheers, when you invite me here to talk and then try to bury me. That's not truth, that's a power trip. The studio fell silent, the weight of Pedro's words hanging heavy, as producers signaled frantically, security inching closer, and the crowd waited for the moment that would push this clash into history. George Stephanopoulos' voice echoed across the Good Morning America set, his challenge to Pedro Pascal hanging in the air, demanding he prove how the show failed its viewers, his hands still pressed against the desk as if anchoring himself in the storm of their confrontation. Pedro stood firm, his posture unyielding, his chair pushed back from the escalating clash, his words about George's power trip landing like a final blow in a battle that had turned a routine Fantastic Four promotion into a raw, unfiltered showdown. Robin Roberts and Michael Strahan sat silent, their earlier attempts to defuse the situation abandoned, while producers in the control room signaled frantically, their headsets buzzing with panic as security guards hovered closer, ready to step in if the tension tipped over. Hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts below, because this final act will reveal who walks away with their dignity intact and who's left grappling with the fallout of their own choices. Pedro leaned forward, his voice low and sharp. You want proof, George? Look at what's happening right now. You invited me to talk about Fantastic Four, a story about unity and resilience. But you turned this into a personal attack. You're not proving me wrong. You're proving my point. You'd rather win a fight than have an honest conversation. George stood taller, his voice booming. Honest conversation, Pedro. I'm giving you one. I'm calling out your nonsense about morning shows being out of touch. You don't get to throw shade and then play victim when I push back. You're here to sell a movie, not judge my work. Pedro shook his head, his tone steady. Push back, George. You're not pushing back. You're digging into my life, my past. To make me look small. I came to talk about hope and teamwork, but you made this a circus. And now you're mad because I'm not playing your game. George's eyes flashed, his voice sharp. A circus? You're calling my show a circus? I've been out here reporting on real issues. War, politics, and justice while you're playing superheroes. Don't lecture me about what's real, Pedro. You don't get to judge me. Pedro's hands clenched, his voice cutting through. I'm not judging. I'm calling it like I see it. You talk about real issues, but you turn them into segments to keep people watching. You dismiss folks who don't agree with you. That's not reporting, that's performing. And I'm done being your punching bag. George's face tightened, his voice rising. Done, huh? Then go, Pedro. Nobody's keeping you here. If you can't handle tough questions, get off my set. This is my show, and I don't need your attitude. Pedro took a step toward the exit, his voice calm but piercing. Your show, George, but you don't get to invite me in, attack me, and then cry foul when I defend myself. I'm leaving because I respect myself too much to stay in this trap, not because you're telling me to go. The crowd clapped loudly, some shouting support, others nodding in agreement, as security guards raised their hands, hesitant but alert, sensing Pedro's resolve. George's voice followed him, shrill and defiant. Defend yourself, Pedro. You started this. Throwing shade at morning shows. Now you're walking away like some hero. Go sell your superhero flick and leave the real talk to me. Pedro paused at the stage's edge, turning back, his voice soft but powerful. Real talk, George. Real talk is listening, not attacking. It's building bridges, not burning them. I came here to share a story about hope, Fantastic Four's message, but you chose a fight. And I want this audience to remember who tried to keep it honest and who made it personal. The crowd erupted in applause, their support clear, as Pedro gave a final nod. Walking off the set, his head high, his dignity unshaken. George sank into his chair, his hands trembling, his earlier confidence gone, replaced by a flicker of regret as he realized he'd overplayed his hand, his ambush backfiring in front of millions. Robin Roberts tried to pivot, her voice strained. "All right, we'll be right back after this break." But the crowd's silence spoke louder, their faces reflecting a mix of shock and judgment as the camera zoomed in on George's forced smile, his attempt to regain control falling flat. The live broadcast cut to commercial, but the fallout was immediate. Clips of the clash flooding social media, hashtags like #Pedro vs George trending worldwide as fans posted. Pedro walked off like a legend, while others criticized George. He tried to trap him and got owned. News outlets jumped in, headlines screaming, "Pedro Pascal storms off GMA after Stephanopoulos clash," with analysts praising Pedro's grace, his refusal to stoop to personal attacks, noting how his raw honesty about his immigrant roots and early struggles resonated deeply. Commentators pointed out George's misstep, his reliance on cheap shots clashing with his journalistic reputation, costing him the audience's trust. George's team released a statement about passionate exchanges and misunderstandings, but it did little to stem the backlash. As viewers questioned his authenticity, his polished image dented by a moment of hubris. Pedro stayed silent, letting his exit speak, his Fantastic Four role now tied to a real-life stand for principle, amplifying his reputation as a star who stood his ground without losing his integrity. The confrontation became a cultural touchstone, replayed in viral videos and debated in think pieces, with one post summing it up. "Pedro Pascal showed us how to fight for respect without throwing punches." The clash reshaped how people viewed morning shows, sparking conversations about authenticity versus performance, about using platforms to unite rather than divide. Pedro emerged stronger, his walk-off a testament to standing up for what's right, his Chilean heritage and early hustles in Hollywood now a badge of honor, not a weapon to be twisted. George, meanwhile, faced a reckoning, his legacy as a trusted journalist tarnished by a moment of overreach, his attempt to humiliate Pedro exposing his own flaws. Years later, this showdown would be remembered as a lesson in integrity, a reminder that respect outshines drama, and Pedro's final words would echo, proving who fought for honesty and who fell to their own ego. A defining moment that cemented his place as a voice of authenticity in a world craving it.
Thank you for watching our channel Modern Stories. If you liked our video, you should subscribe for more amazing videos like this. Have a healthy and happy day. See you in the next one.